The woman untied her robe and walked to the mirror in her underwear. Her body was covered in bite marks, and she seemed to have suffered some kind of abuse. The woman's name was Mindy. She was a young widow. Mindy lived in her late husband's house. Suddenly, there was a noise coming from the basement. She got up in despair and went downstairs. Mindy opened the door to the basement.
I prefer the arm.
I know.
Mindy had been raising a monster, feeding it with her own body. Her arms were covered in bite marks. She had been bitten all over by the monster. After briefly disinfecting herself, she ordered takeout. Mindy received a call from her daughter. Alice missed her mother very much. She asked her mother when she would be home. Mindy couldn't give a definite time. She only said that, once she finished her business, she would go to her grandmother's house to pick her up. Immediately, the elderly woman took the phone and scolded Mindy. "What on earth is going on? How could you leave the child with me for 3 weeks?" The grandmother believed that Mindy was irresponsible and hung up the phone in anger. Mindy had no one to confide in her struggles. She could only silently endure. In the evening, the bell from the basement rang again. Mindy covered her face in pain, unwilling to face reality. The next day, Mindy dragged herself out to shop. She ran into an acquaintance, Mary, who was shocked to see her pale face. Mary suspected that Mindy was in trouble.
Oh, no, actually,
Mindy returned home and continued to feed the monster. In the basement, her leg flesh was being torn away, and in the pitch-black room, there was only the terrifying sound of chewing. The monster suddenly asked Mindy if she believed in God. Mary didn't know if God existed, but the merciful deity seemed to have abandoned Mindy long ago. That was why she ended up in such a fate. From their conversation, it was clear that Mindy willingly allowed herself to be eaten by the monster to protect her daughter. One day, representatives from the Child Protective Services came. Mary must have told them something. The next moment, the investigator explained that they received a report concerning child welfare. Someone believed that Mindy was not capable of raising her child, but it seemed now that she truly resembled a junkie. Mindy was furious at these words and refused to let the investigator inside. However, the investigator made it clear that this was for her own good. If she refused the routine check, the police would get involved and apply for a search warrant. With no other choice, Mindy had to invite her in. After all, there was no problem in the room. The investigator handed Mindy a business card. She hoped that when Mindy brought Alice back from her grandmother's house, she could call the agency. Just then, the call bell from the basement rang. The investigator noticed the sound was coming from downstairs and ignored Mindy's obstruction. The investigator went down the stairs and opened the door to the basement, but the basement was completely dark. The light bulb was broken. A foul smell wafted from the darkness. Mindy explained that it was just a storage room, and since no one ever came in, the light bulb was broken. The investigator did not dwell on the issue and set the next visit for Tuesday. The investigator told Mindy to make sure her daughter was home as well. After saying this, the investigator hurriedly left. Mindy returned to the basement.
we need to talk. This has to stop.
That said, Mindy knew better than anyone that her deal with the monster could not be stopped. The monster also understood the outcome. It proudly rang the dinner bell. Mindy could only extend her arm. Feeling intense pain, Mindy pushed the monster's head away, interrupting its meal. It was displeased, but Mindy made a suggestion.
What if I find you something else to eat?
You mean someone else?
Yes.
Mindy was well aware that her body was about to be exhausted, even though the monster nibbled at her each time, allowing her time to heal. She knew that if this continued, she would surely die. If she died, the monster would not survive for long either. They had a symbiotic relationship. In the end, the monster made a compromise. Perhaps a more varied diet was not a bad thing. In the evening, Mindy dressed up carefully and went out. The heavy makeup concealed her frail complexion. Soon, Mindy spotted her target, a man sitting at the bus stop. She pulled out a cigarette and offered it to him, but the man rejected her. Clearly, the man mistook Mindy for a prostitute. He tensed up, feeling very cautious. She said she just wanted to go home. Mindy explained that she was not in the profession he thought. Then, Mindy started a normal conversation. She learned that the man's name was Paul, and he had neither a wife nor a girlfriend. He lived alone with a cat. This was the perfect prey. Mindy unbuttoned her shirt, hinting that she lives nearby. Tonight, she didn't want to spend it alone. Paul easily took the bait and followed Mindy into the monster's den. Paul sat stiffly on the sofa, trying several times to get up and leave. Paul was not a bold man. Mindy suggested, "We could have some ice cream." She went into the kitchen and pulled out the ice cream. Then, she crushed some sleeping pills and mixed them in. The sounds coming from the kitchen made Paul even more anxious. He shouldn't have followed a stranger home. But soon, Mindy put on a casual demeanor and returned to the living room. Mindy noticed that Paul didn't want to eat the ice cream. She directly fed him with a spoon. Paul ate half a bowl, and then he started to vomit. Mindy feared he would expel the pills, so she grabbed a pair of scissors. The next moment, Paul collapsed onto the floor. Mindy grabbed his ankle and dragged Paul into the basement. The monster was picky. It didn't like to eat dead people. Mindy explained that he had merely fainted. Hearing this, the monster bit Paul, and in his blood, it tasted despair and pain. This flavor did not sit well with the monster. Mindy felt helpless and had to drag Paul back upstairs. Mindy woke him up and falsely claimed that the ice cream was expired and that he had food poisoning. When Paul saw the scars on his hands, he hurriedly fled the place. The next day, Mindy woke up early, untying her robe as she walked to the mirror. Various wounds covered her skin. Feeling troubled, she went to the park to relax. Mindy encountered an elderly woman who came over to talk to her. The two looked at a family of 3 not far away. Recalling their own children, the elderly woman said that raising children is divided into 3 stages. First, standing behind them, then in front of them, and finally beside them. When the child is young and unstable, we must stand behind them to support them and prevent them from falling. During the child's growth, we need to stand in front of them to protect them. In the 3rd stage, the child walks alongside the mother, facing challenges and solving problems together.
We stand beside them and face adversity with them.
After the elderly woman finished speaking, she prepared to take her leave. It was then that Mindy noticed the scars on her arm. Clearly, they shared similar experiences. The woman's words had another meaning. She hoped Mindy would not face adversity alone. On Tuesday, the investigator did not receive a call. At this time, she visited again. If Mindy continued to evade, she would call law enforcement to revoke Mindy's custody of Alice. This threat had an effect. Mindy led the investigator upstairs, falsely claiming that Alice was afraid of strangers and must be hiding. The investigator was unwilling to play along. She was preparing to follow procedure. The bell rang from the basement again, and she rushed downstairs. The investigator opened the basement door, calling out Alice's name. The investigator suspected that Mindy was holding her daughter captive, and her gaze was filled with disdain. Mindy pushed the investigator into the darkness and pulled the door shut. Soon, screams from the investigator and the monster's growls echoed from the basement. Mindy gripped the doorknob tightly, waiting for the struggle to settle into silence. She cautiously opened the door and saw the monster with blood all over its face. The investigator had vanished, and the blood on the ground would be licked clean by the monster. This visitor would leave no trace, yet Mindy felt a constant unease. The investigator was not alone. Her family and colleagues would come looking for her here.
Why not just finish me off like that?
But much less fun.
Mindy felt that the elderly woman was right. She decided to bring her daughter back. The next day, perhaps all of this was the monster's lie, making Mindy believe that the sacrifices she was making were to protect her daughter. Maybe Alice was not in danger at all. The monster was using a mother's love to manipulate Mindy. After realizing this, Mindy became determined to defeat the monster. The monster threatened her, saying that if she dared to bring the little girl back,
I will devour every inch of you, except for your eyes, so that you may watch helplessly.
Mindy was not deterred by the monster's words. Then let's see just how strong you are to take my daughter from me. The next day, the grandmother brought Alice back. 3 women, 2 pairs of mothers and daughters. As Mindy worried about Alice, the grandmother was also concerned about her. Regardless of whether Mindy was a mother, she would always be a girl in her grandmother's eyes. But Mindy did not dare to tell her mother the truth. She said she could handle everything and would no longer make her mother worry. After Mindy saw her mother off, the atmosphere in the house became a bit awkward. After all, Alice was already 10 years old, It was no longer easy to deceive her. Alice wanted to know why Mindy had left her at her grandmother's house. Mindy told her daughter to come downstairs for breakfast.
Do you trust me?
Yeah, I guess.
Mindy told her daughter that when she had nightmares or heard strange noises as a child, she always told her there were no monsters in the world. But it turned out that monsters really exist, and there was one right downstairs. That's why I sent you to your grandmother's house. But now, the way to stop the monster is for us to face it together. Although Alice found her mother's words frightening, she still held her hand because she had unconditional trust in her mother. The mother and daughter arrived at the basement door, and Mindy opened it. However, there was nothing inside. No terrifying monster. Mindy felt confused and dashed upstairs. Mindy looked panicked, and Alice felt scared. Fortunately, Mindy quickly composed herself and speculated that it was all over. Maybe they had driven the monster away. In the evening, after Mindy watched her daughter get into bed, she went to the basement alone to confirm that the monster had indeed left. Mindy sighed in relief and went upstairs to rest. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by her daughter's cries. Mindy rushed to Alice's bedroom and stumbled upon the monster gnawing at her daughter. The next moment, Mindy woke up from the dream. She hurriedly checked Alice's room, where her daughter was lying in bed, sleeping. It turned out that it had only been a nightmare. The next day, the head of Child Protective Services visited. He came because the investigator had not submitted the follow-up documents. Regarding Mindy's case, he would not give up until he saw Alice. Mindy felt helpless and had to let him in. The head requested to talk to the little girl alone. Mindy anxiously waited outside. Fortunately, their conversation was very brief. Although Mindy didn't know what Alice had said, the head dismissed any doubts about Mindy. Soon, he announced that the case was closed, and he was ready to leave. As he left a business card, saying that if Mindy encountered the investigator, she could contact him immediately. In the evening, Mindy left her daughter in the living room reading, while she prepared to take a shower. Just after Mindy left, Alice heard a knock on the door. She carefully opened the door, only to find the monster standing there greeting her. Alice did not panic, and refused the monster's request to come in, because her mother had told her not to let strangers in. But the monster said, "I am a good friend of your mother, and I hope you can help me. Pass a message to Mindy. Just tell her that a person named Agar visited earlier." Alice agreed, and closed the door tightly. Alice hurried to tell her mother that a person named Agar had come to visit. Upon hearing this, Mindy immediately rushed out of the bathroom. She saw the door open, and Mindy instantly panicked. Alice was also puzzled. She had just closed the door. The next moment, a loud crash echoed from the room. Alice wanted to shout for her mother to leave, but Mindy knew that avoiding the problem was not the solution. "This is our house. It's the others who should leave." She took her daughter into the basement. The next moment, the door slammed shut, and the room was filled with flickering red light, creating an eerie atmosphere. Mindy couldn't open the door, so she turned around and held her daughter tightly. The demon whispered in their ears. Then, the dinner bell rang, the basement door opened, and Alice noticed her mother was very tense. Gathering her courage, Alice reassured her mother not to be afraid. They could kill the monster. After coming to a decision, they went to the kitchen to find tools. Unexpectedly, the monster suddenly appeared, kneeling on the ground with a calm demeanor. "Kill me. Let Alice see the real you. Let her know you are just like me. When it's all over, as I take my last breath, you will clean the room just like you did when you ate people." Hearing this, Mindy dropped the knife and crawled in front of the monster to make a sacrifice. Mindy wanted her daughter to escape the lair of the monster. Alice approached and tore off a piece of the monster's flesh with her teeth. Mindy felt inspired, and the mother and daughter lunged at the monster, devouring it alive. This time, they finally stood side by side. The film ends here. On the surface, it tells a story of a monster eating people, but in reality, it expresses a metaphor for the mother-daughter relationship. The main theme of the film revolves around the 3 stages mentioned by the elderly woman. Mindy thought that, by sacrificing herself and pushing her daughter away, she could protect her from the monster. But in reality, the monster exploited this to manipulate her into feeding itself. Fortunately, Mindy was awakened by the elderly woman, and she faced adversity together with her daughter. They defeated the monster together. When the mother and daughter were trapped in the basement, they had heard the voice of Mindy's husband Mike. Perhaps this hints that The monster is actually the emotional burden Mindy carries after losing her husband. By hiding the existence of the monster from her daughter, she was concealing her pain from losing her husband. Only by laying everything bare can the festering wounds begin to heal. If you enjoy my channel, please give me a subscribe.